Picture this. It's the morning of February 6th, 1978. You're sitting at a Formica kitchen table in Boston, or maybe Providence, nursing a cup of percolated coffee. The radio is crackling with the morning news, buried under a layer of AM static. Outside, the sky is a flat, bruised gray, the kind that usually signals a dreary Monday, but nothing catastrophic. The weatherman is calling for a nuisance storm, maybe a few inches, enough to grease the roads, but nothing to cancel school over. You finish your toast, grab your keys to the Ford LTD or the Chevy Impala, and head out into the cold. You have no idea that you are driving straight into the mouth of a monster. By nightfall, that car will be a frozen steel tomb buried under 10 feet of snow. The roads you know by heart will vanish, erased from the map entirely. This wasn't just a storm. For the millions of people in the Northeast about to be slammed by the white hurricane, this wasn't a day for vintage aesthetic snow angels. It was the beginning of a terrifying, suffocating siege that would turn the mundane act of driving home into a fight for survival. To understand why the trap snapped shut so perfectly, you have to look at the rhythm of 1978. The country was moving at the pace of heavy machinery. Cars were land yachts, rear-wheel drive behemoths made of heavy steel and chrome, powered by V8 engines that guzzled leaded gas at 60 cents a gallon. There were no cell phones to check radar maps, no GPS to reroute you around traffic. You relied on the broadcast news, and that morning, the news got it wrong. The meteorologists were watching a low-pressure system off the coast of South Carolina, but they missed the colossal jet stream diving down from Canada. They failed to predict the phasing, the moment these two massive systems would lock arms and explode into a meteorological bomb. So people went to work. Kids went to school. The machinery of the city hummed along, completely unaware that the atmospheric pressure was dropping to levels usually seen in Category 3 hurricanes. The snow started just before noon. It didn't drift down. It arrived horizontally. The wind picked up, screaming through the concrete canyons of downtown Boston and tearing across the flatlands of Rhode Island. This wasn't the fluffy, dry snow of a Christmas card. It was heavy, wet cement, driven by winds gusting over 70 miles per hour. Within an hour, visibility dropped to zero. The sky and the ground merged into a single, disorienting wall of white. Panic is contagious, and it spreads faster than a virus. Around 1 p.m., the realization hit everyone at once. This is bad. Offices closed early. Schools dismissed students. Suddenly, millions of people were pouring onto the highways simultaneously, desperate to get back to the safety of their living rooms. It was the worst possible timing. The plows, which were barely keeping up with the 3 inches per hour accumulation, were instantly swamped by the flood of fleeing traffic. The trap closed tightest on Route 128, the massive highway ringing Boston. It became the epicenter of the disaster. As the snow deepened, those rear-wheel drive sedans began to lose traction. One car would spin out, blocking a lane. Then another. Then a jackknife tractor trailer would block 2 more. Within minutes, the highway transformed from an artery of movement into a parking lot of paralyzed steel. Imagine sitting in that gridlock. The engine is idling, the heater blasting hot, dry air that smells faintly of exhaust and ozone. You can't see the car in front of you, only the red glow of taillights fading in the whiteout. You wait for traffic to move, but it doesn't. 10 minutes pass, 30, an hour. The snow isn't stopping, it's rising. It creeps up the hubcaps, then the bumpers, then the wheel wells. Drivers sat in their cars, listening to the radio, hearing the panic rise in the announcers' voices. "Stay in your cars," they said. "Do not attempt to walk." But as the hours dragged on and the gas gauges dipped toward empty, the temperature inside those metal boxes began to plummet. Night fell, bringing a darkness so absolute it felt physical. The wind howled like a freight train, shaking the heavy frames of the stranded vehicles. On Route 128 alone, over 3,500 cars and trucks were dead in the water. The snow was falling so fast, 4 inches an hour at its peak, that if you stepped out to clear your windshield, your tracks would be filled before you got back inside. The danger shifted from inconvenience to lethal threat. Carbon monoxide became the silent killer. As the snow piled up against the rear of the cars, it blocked the tailpipes. Exhaust fumes, having nowhere to go, began to seep into the passenger cabins. People, exhausted and freezing, cracked their windows just a sliver, trying to balance the need for air against the biting cold. But amidst the terrifying isolation of that highway graveyard, a strange social dynamic emerged. The boundaries of the daily commute dissolved. People abandoned their vehicles and huddled together in the few trucks that still had gas. Strangers shared cigarettes and ration candy bars found in glove compartments. CB radios buzzed with chatter, truckers coordinating help, voices in the dark checking on one another. their handles echoing through the static. By midnight, the highway was no longer a road. It was a chaotic frozen sculpture garden of buried technology. The snow had swallowed entire semi-trucks. The silence of the engines dying out one by one was replaced by the roar of the wind. Those who decided to walk faced a wind chill of 30 below zero, navigating a landscape where landmarks had been obliterated. The familiar world of 1978, the discos, the gas stations, the diners, was gone, replaced by a hostile white alien planet. And the storm was only just getting started. When the wind finally died down, what remained wasn't a city or a suburb. It was a moonscape. If you woke up on Wednesday, February 8, 1978, the first thing you noticed was the silence. The roar of the 20th century, the constant hum of traffic, the distant whine of jet engines, the clatter of industry, had been simply deleted. It was a silence so heavy it felt physical, broken only by the muffled scrape of a shovel or the distant bark of a dog. You went to your front door to look outside, but you couldn't. For thousands of people, opening the front door meant staring at a solid, compressed wall of white ice. The drifts had banked up against the houses, sealing them shut like tombs. People had to climb out of second-story windows just to see the world. And what a world it was. The geography of the Northeast had been erased. Street signs were gone, buried under 10-foot drifts. Cars were unrecognizable humps, mere bumps in the topography. In the suburbs, you could walk right over the roof of a buried station wagon and not even know it. The snow wasn't soft powder. The wind had packed it into something resembling styrofoam or concrete. You didn't just shovel it, you had to carve it, block by heavy block. Inside the homes, the vintage aesthetic of the 1970s quickly lost its charm. The power was out for hundreds of thousands. In 1978, houses weren't as insulated as they are today. The single-pane windows frosted over on the inside. The heat leached out of the walls within hours. Families retreated to the one room with a fireplace or a wood stove, hanging heavy wool blankets over the doorways to trap the warmth. Life shrank down to the basics: heat, food, and information. The refrigerator was useless, so people just stuck their milk and perishables in the snowbank outside the kitchen window, nature's freezer. If you had an electric stove, you were eating cold soup out of the can. If you had gas, you were lucky, boiling water for instant coffee and huddling around the blue flame like it was a campfire. This was the pre-digital age. There was no internet, no streaming, no cell phones to text your relatives. If the landline was down, you were cut off. The only lifeline to the outside world was the transistor radio. Families sat in the dark, wrapped in sleeping bags and itchy Afghans, listening to the local news stations. The voices of the announcers became the only proof that civilization still existed. They read long lists of school closures, which was redundant, since everything was closed, and relayed messages from emergency services. But the real heroes of the communication breakdown were the citizens themselves. This was the golden age of the CB radio. In 1978, having a citizens band radio in your car or house was as common as having a smartphone today. It was the social network of the era. While the police bands were overwhelmed, the citizens took over. Breaker 19 became the distress call of the blizzard. Truckers stranded on the highways relayed coordinates of buried cars to snowmobile owners. Teenagers with base stations in their bedrooms coordinated prescription deliveries for the elderly. It was a massive ad hoc mesh network of amateurs saving lives. You'd hear a crackly voice cut through the static. "I've got a family out of oil on Main Street. Anyone near with a sled?" And 5 minutes later, a neighbor would reply, "I'm on it." Outside, the struggle was physical. The driving ban was in effect. Governor Dukakis, wearing his famous sweaters, went on TV, for those who had power, and declared that anyone driving a non-emergency vehicle would be arrested. The roads belonged to the plows and the National Guard. This created a surreal pedestrian society. People strapped on cross-country skis or snowshoes, or just tied plastic bags over their boots and walked down the middle of major highways. I-95 wasn't a road, it was a walking trail. Strangers met in the middle of the street, sharing flasks of whiskey and stories of where they were when the storm hit. There was a weird, giddy camaraderie in the disaster. The class barriers dissolved. The banker and the mechanic were both just guys trying to dig a tunnel to the grocery store. And the grocery stores were war zones. When a store finally managed to pry its doors open, it was stripped bare in minutes. There was no bread, no milk, no eggs. People bought whatever was left. Canned beets, weird distinctively 70s snacks like Spam or weird gelatin mixes. Cash was king. Credit card machines were useless without power. You paid what it cost or you went hungry. But the darkness wasn't all community spirit. There was looting. In the cities, thieves used the cover of the snow to smash windows and grab televisions and stereos, hauling them away on sleds. The National Guard had to be deployed, driving Humvees and massive trucks through the streets, soldiers with rifles standing guard on corners in Boston and Providence. It looked like martial law. The cleanup was a monumental back-breaking agony. We didn't have the heavy machinery we have today. A lot of the digging was done by hand. Men in their 50s and 60s, guys who smoked a pack a day and ate red meat for dinner, went out to shovel tons of wet, heavy snow. The tragedy of the shoveling heart attack became a grim statistic of the blizzard. Hospitals were overwhelmed not just by frostbite, but by men whose hearts gave out trying to clear the driveway. The sheer logistics of moving the snow were impossible. There was simply nowhere to put it. They had to load it onto dump trucks and drive it to the ocean to dump it in the harbor. In some parking lots, the snow piles lasted until May, black and gritty mounds of ice that refused to melt, preserving trash and lost mittens from February deep into the spring. The thaw revealed the true toll. As the snow melted, it uncovered the cars on the highways, some of which still held the frozen bodies of those who hadn't made it out. It revealed the crushed roofs of warehouses and the battered coastlines where houses had been turned into kindling. The blizzard of '78 wasn't just a storm, it was a demarcation line in time. For the people who lived through it, life was divided into before the blizzard and after. It proved that even in the modern industrial 20th century, with all our V8 engines and nuclear power and hubris, nature could still simply turn off the switch. It forced a pause that lasted a week. It forced people to look at their neighbors, to slow down, and to survive using nothing but their wits and a shovel. By the time the roads were cleared and the schools reopened, the world felt different. The snow was gray and dirty now, piled high on the curbs. The cars sputtered back to life, belching blue smoke. The '70s ground back into motion. But for 1 week, the white hurricane had stopped time itself. Looking back at the blizzard of '78 from the comfort of the 21st century, it seems almost impossible that a storm could blindside us like that. Today, we have Doppler radar, supercomputers, and apps that tell us the exact minute the first flake will fall. We have heated seats, remote starters, and the ability to work from home. We have gained safety, precision, and comfort. But in gaining that safety, we have lost the shared experience of the big pause. We have lost the silence that falls over a city when the engines stop. We've lost the necessity of relying on the person next door because the government can't reach you. The blizzard of '78 was a terrifying, deadly event, but it was also a moment when the noise of the world faded away, and for a few days, all that mattered was keeping the fire lit and the family warm. We are safer now, certainly, but we are also much less together.